Good afternoon or good evening, depending on what time you're tuning into Second Saints. I'm John Hendrix alongside Ross Jackson here for another Saints training camp recap. We are day 2 in the books. Thursday, I think we got our internet fixed, and all that fun
right.
stuff. We got a different venue too, for sure, out here at UC Irvine.
Yeah, big thank you to the Carver School of the Arts.
Yeah, your alma mater here, man. The Anteaters.
That's outside.
It's crazy. I got a little bit of a tour today. It was pretty nice. So, but how you holding up, man?
Great, man. Great. It's nice to, I always say it, but when it comes to these training camp practices, that it's just fantastic to be back out watching football. But I think that a bigger part of it too is just being able to see like the dedication and the work. Like, this is what we grind for. This is what we're here for. So it's exciting to get it under. How have you been holding up so far?
I'm good, man. Been here since this morning. So it's just one of those things where it's like, this is good because it's a seamless day. We get done with camp, got all the stuff there. We talk to players and then, we get to do all the observations and now we get to do our show. And then when we get done with that, we get to enjoy a little bit of Cali. So I definitely enjoy that for sure in that aspect. But if you guys have any questions, be sure to put them in the chat. We'll answer as many as we can, obviously. But here to talk about Saints training camp. Look, a lot of stuff happened today, and again, we only get to see an hour and a half, right? So it's not like we're seeing a whole ton of football like we have maybe in the past. And of course, the NFL rules is only an hour and a half. But man, in that hour and a half, a lot of information, a lot of stuff that we had. I mean, we had defense get another 2 turnovers today. We had Nathan Peterman hooking up with Mason Tipton for a touchdown. I mean, that was a big deal for sure.
That was huge.
Saw some injury scares on it. I guess let's just start with the attendance part because I think that's the biggest thing, obviously, that we want to run down. No Kendra Miller today.
Yep.
Still dealing with that hamstring injury. Don't know the severity of it, but we obviously know that he's not going to be in the equation. Justin Heron dealing with that knee injury. We saw Shane Lemieux leave practice due to an ankle injury. And then big scare today was Trajan Jeffcoat. I mean, he was in pain. Like it was agonizing pain. So it was in team. So he went down and I mean, he was just there for about 5 minutes and he had to get carted off. The good news is that I was told it was a dislocated elbow, but no ligament damage on him. And he's not going to need surgery, but still going to miss some time. So obviously these injuries happen, unfortunate because Jeffcoat was a good player in OTAs and minicamp that we saw, but few things there. We got to see Nephi Sewell. He was back. We didn't see him yesterday, but we saw Juwan and Tano. But we saw Nephi doing some work off to the side. But just kind of your impressions, first of all, camp day 2.
Yeah. I think the big thing that I really took away from the second day of camp is that we're still seeing a standout defense so far, right? And this is pretty typical of training camps. Defenses tend to start out fast. And the reason why is because typically year to year, defensive schemes don't change as much as offensive schemes do. You look at the popularity of hiring offensive head coaches in the league and stuff like that, that ends up changing whoever that coach got hired away from. Now all of a sudden they're having to change their offense and things like that. And things typically just change more when the offenses and the changes that they undergo tend to drive the direction of the league. And so because of that, you see a lot of new things being implemented on offenses, and then defenses are typically just trying to keep doing the thing that they've always been good at. You know what I mean? Like they just want to remain like where they are. And so I think that because of that, we're seeing the defense start out very strong. Yeah. Like you mentioned, more takeaways today, more plays, but we are going to see this offense eventually close the gap and everything. We are going to see some of the younger players close the gap with some of the veterans and stuff like that. And so once we get to that portion of training camp, which would be, I would give that like a week or two before we really start to see that. But right now, I think the thing that's really nice is think about how many times you've ever watched an NFL game and the quarterback throws a ball directly to a defender and the defender can't catch it.
Sure, right.
Or or like a guy goes up to fill the right run fit but can't make the stop, or is in position but doesn't take the right angle and stuff like that. Seeing a lot of that from this New Orleans Saints defense. We're watching them still be opportunistic and take advantage of the opportunities that are being created while an offense is struggling to get their legs under them. And I think that for me is a positive takeaway where you can still feel good about where the defense is while understanding that, hey, the offense is going to be undergoing some shifts and changes here.
Yeah, look, I think when you look at the transition, I mean, I know because some people say, well, the run game seems like it's starting out slow and seems to start out slow. And I mean, again, this is kind of part of the course, right? Yeah. And I think what I look at is the good positioning. Again, we're still seeing motion, big staples in this. Yeah, this is going to be a big thing. And again, you look at how I think the play action part of it has been really big, maybe underrated a little bit. And I know we were talking to Landon Young today, but I got to be honest, like the way they're selling the play action gets me fooled a little bit too. I'm like, this. He said it's more designed to be a run, and it sounds silly, but like they're selling it pretty hard.
Oh, I got caught looking a couple times. I got caught looking like a bad cameraman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's just facts. That's how it happens. But I think looking at the offense and seeing things like that are going to go a long way, right?
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about, some of the slumps. And of course you see the interceptions or the things like that. I mean, we haven't seen any fumbles, which talking to Camara yesterday, that was a big issue that wasn't being dealt with. I mean, interceptions are going to happen and you can make of it what you want.
Right.
But again, it's a part of the training camp process. Good on the defense. They should shine at this early point. And so we're going to find out soon enough when they're going to hit their stride, if you will, and see what kind of things they can put together. Because I know Clint Kubiak's going to dial up a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To attack this defense.
Yeah.
We saw it in minicamp and OTAs.
Yeah, and it makes sense right now. They're starting off so run heavy over on the offensive side, which makes a ton of sense because this offense is going to be predicated by its run game. So if you want those boot actions, if you want those rollouts, if you want those, one of my favorite football words, waggles, you have to have
Joel Myers, shout out.
Shout out Joel Myers always. You have to have the run game. One of my other favorite football words, percolating. Like you got to be able to matriculate down the field. You know what I'm saying? So I'm using all my football words today.
Big words.
But you got to be, that's got to be the thing that everything in your offense is predicated off of. Right. And then you can start to layer in, okay, now that we've understood like how to set this look up for this outside zone run, what's the play action version of that? What's the rollout version of that? What's the bootleg version of that? And so on and so forth, right? What's the reverse version of that? It's where we fake, you fake that, but then you pitch or you turn to pitch or whatever. There's all of these other wrinkles that you can then add, but you want to start off by setting up what's going to be your base, right? I always look at NFL offenses like learning how to play piano. You kind of learn like the basics first, then you start learning ornamentation and how to add stuff to it. What's your sort of feel and everything, coming from a dude that can't play piano at all, by the way. But
neither can I. So,
but I understand the process. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
process.
Right. Respect it. And we always talked about during, particularly during rookie mini camps, watching Andrew Janocko set everything up from here's how to call the play, here's the drop back. Yep. Here are the landmarks that you're throwing to based upon the coverage that I tell you you're seeing post snap. Here's the routes on air. Now get into 7-on-7s. Now get into teams. It's called scaffolding, right? You're going to build this, then you're going to add this, then you're going to add this, and you're going to add this. I think we were seeing Clint Kubiak take that same approach, which makes sense. These guys are almost cut from the same cloth.
Sure.
But we're seeing, I think, a similar approach with the way that the Saints are building their offense right now.
Yeah, they're going to install stuff as they go along. I mean, it's not like you're going to see the full playbook on day one. And of course, they got to learn all the things. They got to be able to execute on those types of things, and then they can build upon that, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And so we saw some good plays from the offense today. It's not that the Saints defense just totally went lights out, but they definitely won the day again, like they did on the first day. And I tell you, before we get into kind of the team and maybe even from sevens, one of the things because you looked at the offense today, I looked at the defense. We got to see the receivers and defensive backs go like one-on-one. So they weren't doing like one-on-ones where, they're throwing the ball. They're just trying to jam them up at the line of scrimmage and see who's going to win the battle there. And I tell you, the one thing that stood out for me was Kool-Aid McKinstry on A.T. Perry. I mean, he like stonewalled him from like, A.T. Perry took a step and it was just like, I ain't having none of it. And so he just like,
you will go no further.
You shall not nowhere. Pass. And so, look, I thought that was like a really big moment there. I really like what I saw from Equinemius St. Brown today.
Yeah, it's a big physical dude, man.
Yeah, and he's really underrated. You know what I mean? And so, but I think that drill in itself is something we haven't seen.
That's
right?
true.
Like it's another wrinkle, like what we haven't seen at training camp before. But really exciting drill, and of course there's other ones like Marshawn looking like Marshawn. He got beat on a couple. He still jammed him up a couple. Monte doing the same thing. Paulson. So everybody was involved in that process. But I think that was one of the drills that I really liked today.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting one too, because as you mentioned, we typically don't see that. Usually they go straight into incorporating the ball. But this is one of those. I'm curious about where this came from, and maybe what I think we're supposed to get assistant coaches soon.
Yeah.
And so when we do that, we'll see if we can get an answer on this. But I wonder if that's a Clint Kubiak thing, or if that's a Keith Williams thing, or like where that comes from. because I'm really curious to see about like where that goes, because then you're having to go to, Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, Marcus Robertson, and then say, hey, we want to incorporate, because they did this during individual drills.
Yeah.
And so this took the DBs away from doing DB drills, took the wide receivers away from doing wide receiver drills, and then let them get some, what I would call like translatable drills done, right?
Yep.
Things that you're going. You can do whatever, you can say whatever you want about any team in the NFL. At some point, the wide receiver is going to run a dang route. Yeah, and there's going to be a quarterback that's going to try to stop him from doing it, right? And so,
naturally,
right. So you're going to want to do these things that are immediately going to translate to the game. So I thought that was really interesting. And it was a collaborative effort, right?
Yep.
We've heard so much over the course of these 2 days of training camp practices so far about accountability, right? Each one teach one, everybody working together, collaboration, all these other things. I thought that drill in particular was a really good showing of that.
Yeah. Look, Keith Williams about as vocal as anybody. I mean, it doesn't matter what part of the field you are, you hear him getting on the receivers, or, Marcus Robertson getting on to the defensive backs and stuff. I mean, again, we've kind of talked about this, and I know this has been a theme, but the accountability that the offensive staff is showing and in the defensive staff, I mean, it's just a pairing that you just want to keep seeing, that you have continued success. And for a team that has turned in the same 3 results at the end of the year, it's just a refreshment to see something different. And just the biggest thing. And Keith Williams, I mean, you wrote about this too, the fact that he used rugby balls in practice. I mean, they're doing things that we just haven't seen. Like, I get the whole thing about up down that they said that hasn't, but I had never seen up down in training camps I've covered. Like, you can't fool me. But anyways, I just 2 days in, we've seen 3 hours of actual football practice. I mean, but that's the stuff that gets us excited, right? And so again, it's hopefully the building blocks here are stronger foundationally than what they have been in the past. Where you maybe like the 3 little pigs, you making it on straw. Maybe now you're starting to maybe make it out on brick.
Right.
Not some straw house that's just going to crumble and tumble and it's all said and done. So definitely one of those things. Man, I think the other thing was, because I want to talk about what Landon Young said. The thing is, so he was, no changes on the offensive line today, same as yesterday, but he was working in there. He was starting at right tackle on walkthroughs, but he swapped to left. And he said this is the first day that they did put him on the left for out there. And we also saw Lucas Patrick rotate at right guard and left guard. But something that he said about this offense, simplification, simplified, and just kind of talk a little bit about some of the insight, because again, I tell everybody this, you've told them this, every time you talk to Landon Young, you're going to learn something. He's one of the smartest guys I think is out there on the football field. He just handles himself well, and he just has all the knowledge in the world.
Yeah, he's either going to be in media post-career or coaching post-career, one of the two. And it's not going to be his choice. Like, he's not going to be able to say no. So the thing that I thought that was really interesting was, like, we've talked a lot about what it is this New Orleans Saints offense is going to look like and do differently. Play action, motion, more 2 wide receiver sets, wide zone, outside zone schemes and influences and things like that. But one of the other things that I really wanted to kind of get some insight on, and Landon's like the perfect person to ask about something like this, is what are they doing differently from a preparation standpoint? Like, how are you getting ready for this? And he mentioned that one of the things that they've done is they've started to anticipate the challenges that other offenses, that opposing defenses will present them with right before the snap, right? So you walk up to the line, you get everybody ready, you're ready to run this play against this coverage in terms of what the defense is showing you. So you might have 2 deep safeties, and it's looking like the middle of the field is going to be left open, but then right before the snap, one safety comes down to the box, the other one takes away the middle of the field. How do you adjust that? And so a big thing would be that you're setting rules to make sure that everybody is on the same page, and just understanding that, okay, if this happens, then we're all expecting that the offense is going to do this because of it. And everybody's on the same page. And that's what's being installed right now, it sounds like. And so instead of, I'll give another example. Think about the New Orleans Saints defense. You've seen this all the time as a Saints fan. 3rd down and long, 3 down linemen, 2 linebackers sugaring the A gap, right? Letting you know, hey, we might rush, we might not, we might drop back into coverage, we don't know. And then 2 safeties over on the outside doing the same thing. You got 7 players on the line of scrimmage. Who's running? Who's rushing? Who's dropping back into coverage, right? And so if you're an offensive lineman, you are tasked with having to wait till the ball is snapped to know, okay, this guy's my assignment. right? And so you're having to figure out all that stuff. So what the Saints sound like they're doing on the offensive side is that they're installing a whole bunch of these scenarios way ahead of time to say, hey, here's the 15 different things that a defense might look to do. So what are the rules in terms of how we handle those things? That way, once that happens, the ball is snapped, the 2 linebackers drop back, but the 2 safeties come hot off the edge. What's the expectation? And that expectation might be check down, get 5 yards. That expectation might be, okay, the safeties are dropping back, but the two linebackers are coming up the middle. So here's how the offensive line deals with that, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of those rules now that are being set up so that everybody has the same understanding in terms of if the defense does this, we do this, which is very different than if the defense does this, I do this. Because if you end up in a situation where you and I are lined up next to each other, we see the same thing, but you think that thing means one thing, I think that thing means another thing, the quarterback's going to be hurt by the time that we're all said and done. Right. And that's something that we saw sometimes with this Saints offense and their offensive line last year. This type of practice of anticipating what the opposing defense might look to do and having a universal understanding across the board of what you're going to do about it, how you're going to respond to it ahead of time, that prevents those types of moments.
And another thing that I really like what he said, it puts the best players in a position to do what they're supposed to do. Like that says it for me right there.
That's big.
Like, and this is not the first person who said that, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing. And one of the other things that he talked about too was just the 15 plays. Like, remember him talking about like 15 plays that they run. They've been doing the same thing for 6 years, and everybody knew what they were kind of doing.
Yeah,
like that's kind of where the Saints offense has evolved. Is everybody became like predictable, I guess, in a way. And so just the fact that the offensive line being excited about putting guys like Alvin Kamara in the right space. To be able to concede, or Chris Olave or Taysom Hill or whoever it might be. You know what I mean? It could be Dalvin Hooker this year. You never know. I mean,
Yeah. Sure looks like it sometimes, man.
For sure. And so, it's one of those, it's pretty refreshing. And again, it's the start of camp. We're not really seeing it yet, but you want to know kind of the ins and outs of what's different. That's a big one.
That's a huge one. Yeah, no, that's a really good observation. And the other thing too, to the idea of like, they became a little bit predictable. They, defenses knew what it was that they wanted to do out of certain formations or in certain game situations. I think was a big tell for the Peyton offense, post Peyton. We heard Dennis Allen talk a lot about, look, they did the same thing for 17 years. It was time to refresh it. And then he even went back to harkening back to his first year as a head coach, where he talked about doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity, where in Matthew Parris's piece that highlighted sort of DA is cool now. I love that. Over at NOLA.com, he mentioned that if you keep running the same things and expecting a different result, that's insanity. So now you're watching him kind of take his own advice, right? And say, okay, this didn't work these last couple of years. We have to try something different. And then here's their opportunity to try something different. And it sounds like the differences are vast.
Yeah, night and day.
In terms of what they're doing. Yeah, night and day. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see it. That's the biggest thing is I don't know what type of capability, because we look at the schedule, Panthers game, you can't make it off of that one, right?
Right.
I mean, you're expected to win that game at this point.
Yeah.
If you can do it against Dallas, maybe you start to believe a little bit more. I would become a believer if that's the case. But you want to see it the following week. Is it real against the Eagles? I think that's the biggest thing is they can show 1 week that they're a certain team, but then the next week they go right back to doing the stuff that they're just notorious for, failing. Yeah. Consistency is going to be key for this team. And I think that's one of the things when you look at how they're being coached right now in training camp, how they're being told to do certain things, that's what they're looking for is consistency this year. And hopefully that's what is out on the field, a product that is consistent. And, because I've always talked about the Saints as a team where they can't win games unless all phases are in sync. And it shouldn't be that way. Yeah. Some teams can look out and say, oh, my offense looks like garbage. Defense is going to save me. The Saints don't have that luxury. If the offense isn't playing well and the defense is, they can't win. If the defense is not playing well and the offense is, they can't win. Like, it just doesn't work for this team. And so they got to make sure they put it together. And again, the way the building blocks and the foundations here, at least from what we see, does seem encouraging.
Yeah, I would say championship teams are not teams that need everything to go perfectly to win games, right? And I think that's where the Saints are trying to get themselves to, is that they don't need everything to go 100% their way in order to walk away with a win. And if you look at last year's schedule, not only that, if you look at the results of last year's schedule, they beat the teams that they were better than. They struggled against the teams that they were the same as, and they lost to the teams that were better than them.
Correct.
And so that is a situation that is typically indicative. I'm on a big word streak today. I'm saying.
We're gonna have to start flashing like a thesaurus or grammar, all those things at the bottom for everybody. So,
but like that's pretty indicative of a team that needs things to go perfectly in order to win those games, because you're typically going to see the things go perfectly against the teams that you are superior to, and so that gives you an opportunity to be able to see some of that. So I'm curious, unless you have anything else on this, I want to know, because we split up again. So John was with defense, I was with offense. Did you have any other takeaways over on the defensive side watching before they got into individuals and sevens and things like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was watching just different cohesion, right? And so you had Michael Hodges, you had Todd Grantham, and then you had Joe Woods. They rotate out each position group. So you had the defensive backs, linebackers, and defensive line. And so one would work on tackling, the next one would work on positioning, the next one would work on something else. I mean, it was just different types of nuances. And again, they do this type of thing commonly, but difference of what they do is different, right? I think that's the thing for me. And so but other than that, looking at some of the players, again, honing in on guys like Marshawn, what's his body language, what does he look like? Alante, again, everything that I've seen, Chase Young, he's just doing like walkthrough stuff and just kind of being around. They're not gonna to be crazy, but this guy looks like I don't know what to say.
Prototypical, man.
Like we talked about it yesterday. Just a Tonka truck. I was thinking like a big old Tonka truck. If you ever, I might be showing my age, but that's what I used to play with. And so again, it's just something that you look at how the makeup is. I tell you, just defensively, just without getting into team, Willie Gay Jr. looks fantastic.
Oh man, he just continues to pop, doesn't he?
And I do like the fact that Jordan touched on this yesterday. Peyton Turner's healthy. Yeah. He looks healthy. He looks like he's comfortable out there. And so I think right now, of course, you want to be healthy. Your body needs to be where it's at, not like what happened yesterday. But again, some of these players are at least in a spot where they look physically like they're ready to go. Yeah. And that's what's big for me.
Yeah, I'm curious, look, to go through 2 days and have 4 injuries, like it's a little bit concerning, but I wonder how much of it is conditioning based, hydration based, things like that aren't necessarily that are more connected to the early goings of training camp than they are really connected to much else. And then to see if that starts to trickle down a little bit as we get into 4 days, 5 days and all that. Because we're only 2 days away from padded practices, like 2 more practices and then padded practices. And so like eventually these guys are going to be like really getting a lot more physical and all that. So you want to go through this acclimation period. You want to go through this period where you're getting the conditioning, getting a little bit healthier and all that, to where you're ready to sustain impact after impact after impact just at a different level than what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, and the 3 injuries beside Kendre Miller, these were all in team drills, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, good point. You get an ankle injury, somebody steps on you, that's a big thing, or a knee going the wrong way, that happens. And what happened to Trajan? I mean, he was engaged in such. And so that was just a tough. So again, Kendre's was individual drills. So you can kind of do the math for that. And, you can draw the conclusions. And so those are things, though. They're injuries, and those are things that you have to pay attention to. And obviously, hopefully the conditioning stays, because that would be another thing. It's just like, okay, I know people used to say this about the Greenbrier when they went. It's like they got soft when they went to the Greenbrier because they didn't get to have the heat and all this other stuff. And so I've lived through those days. And I think for this team, the other part of it that I will say is them being out here, and I won't say who we talked to as a coach, but the camaraderie and the fact that they're being out here together definitely means something different this year for this team. And so it's not like you just go to practice and go home. So I think that's a big thing for them. And I know people gave them a little bit of flack for moving training camp from New Orleans. Of course, that was renovation based and there's no fans here, but in some aspects, I think the team doesn't want the distractions too.
Yeah. There's some value to it. That coach also saying that, when we're not on the field, we're still together. Yeah. And I thought that was pretty telling. I mean, not telling, but I thought that was pretty poignant. Yes. And definitely meant something. Another big word. I wanted to take a look at some of the things that I had over on the offensive side as well. Speaking of running backs, and speaking of Kendre Miller, we did watch Jordan Mims move up in the rotation. Now, And when I say move up in the rotation, I mean, typically it kind of goes like Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, then Jordan Mims. And so with Kendre Miller slotted out, you saw Jordan Mims pop up. And so like there's typically orders that you see them run their individual drills through beyond, which is another telling sort of standard beyond just which quarterback or which team are they playing with. Right. So I thought that was pretty telling there. So he moved up there. I enjoyed watching 3 drills for the running backs in particular that I thought were standout. Yesterday, we talked about the 3 gates that they had to run, and then the two coaches filled the gap and they had to put. So they had a different one today to where it's 2 gates with a handoff. So they introduced the mesh point. The mesh point is the point at which a quarterback's handing off the football meets the running back taking the football. So that's what the mesh point is. And so they introduced that. And then as that running back is going on, what you would call basically a halfback dive, right? Just running right up the middle. One coach would fill a gap, and this is indicative of like a duo run. And then so because that coach filled that gap, the running back had to bounce over to the other. We saw the Los Angeles Rams introduce this to their offense last year to great success, although varied results early on. So much better towards the end of the season with Kyron Williams. And so it was a really big thing. And it plagued the Saints a little bit last year in their run defense. And so great to see a little bit of that going on. The second drill that I thought was really interesting for the running backs was a bag drill to where they would kind of it was all about footwork. And one of the things that we've always said about Jordan Mims is that his footwork is outstanding. Very, very clean footwork, very good command of his body, understanding momentum, all these other things. And so it was great to kind of see that confirmed and replicated in this drill. And then finally, the option route.
Yeah, you were telling me about this. So, and again, Ross was looking at the offense and zoning in on that. Talk about it.
Yeah, man. We love the option route. So the option route is a route in which a running back starts in the backfield, runs a route out past the line of scrimmage, and then is met by whatever coverage player. It could be a linebacker, it could be a defensive back, whatever. But if that defender gives outside leverage, i.e. is further towards the line, further towards the boundary, that running back will then cut towards the inside. If that defender is leveraged towards the middle of the field or has what's called inside leverage, then the running back will bounce toward the outside, out into the flats towards the boundary. And so they were working that not only with the running backs, John, but it was the one non-tight end Taysom Hill drill that we got to see. So we saw it with Taysom Hill come out of the backfield as well. And I was like, tell me more.
Yes.
So it was just great to kind of see that back, because I know fans have been clamoring for the option route to be not just back in the offense, but utilized, right? You might run it, but do you target it? Do you look at it? Do you look for it? And so that was a big thing that, even at one point last year, Alvin Kamara was saying like, yeah, we've been saying to put it back in the offense after we saw him get a big catch and run off of one of those. And so it was great to kind of see that early implementation here in training camp.
Yeah, for a team that wants to run outside, I mean, hello, fly, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that makes sense, right? I hopefully you get to see more of that. And of course, we see a lot of stuff because, I mean, yesterday they were working on, like we said, the fake field goal, busted field goal, and trying to throw it to the offensive lineman. So we're going to see it. But again, you don't want to be that team who doesn't work on stuff and then ends up in a playoff situation. You just don't know what the rules are, or you don't know what's going on.
You hear that, San Francisco? Not
Dallas,
knowing your overtime
Dallas
rules.
Is another
Dallas.
One. No, it was a big one. So. But, for every team, I think this happens for sure. But, you want to say it. But, again, I think for the Saints, it's a good thing to see them mix it up. And I think that's what's most exciting about covering training camp is seeing different wrinkles where it's still the same but different. If it makes sense. And so continue to see more because we got another practice and then another practice. I mean, they don't have an off day until Sunday. So we got plenty of stuff that we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about sevens, or we could talk about the big plays. Let's talk about that. I guess I would say we could start with the big play to Mason Tipton. So it was I was going to say Chad Pennington because I was thinking 10, but that's not right because I just north back 10, 15 years, I guess, maybe something like that. I don't know why.
That's awesome.
Nathan Peterman, not Chad Pennington. Y'all know why y'all subscribe. Come on, I don't have to sit here and tell y'all anything. This is what you subscribe to. This is what you get with us. Nathan Peterman. And so let me caveat there and put this and preface it that Rattler was ahead of Haener. Now it's not going to be a rotation like Dennis Allen said, but this is not this is nothing new. They were already going to have second, Haener gets second team reps or Rattler gets third team reps and then vice versa. I mean, that's going to be a thing, but Peterman only gets a couple of reps.
Yeah. In fact, we actually saw Spencer Rattler jump up to second team reps to wrap up mandatory minicamp. And then it was right back to Haener second team reps to start off training camp, just as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Peterman again, I joked, I put something out on social media that we're 2 days into camp and he's been involved in the two biggest offensive plays out there. The first one yesterday was to A.T. Perry on the sideline. That was a big connection. And today, just a nice little play action play and finding Mason Tipton down there on the post route in the middle, big 40-yard touchdown. Big moment for Mason Tipton. This is a guy we've talked about a little bit before. His speed is his biggest asset. Man. Came back on another one in team, and he also had a good connection there. That pipeline is probably something we're going to see in the preseason. The Tipton to Peterman and all that other stuff, I think that's a big one. But that easily, I think, for me, was a good thing to see just because it did show the Saints' defensive vulnerability, for one thing. Obviously, it's not always sunshine, roses, and daisies for the defense. But, seeing that one happen, Mason Tipton is a guy we've talked about, but he's somebody that if he can learn and adapt, especially with Keith Williams back there, not saying he's going to make final roster, but you talk about like this year's Shaq Davis, that might be this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want that dude that's going to be able to, and we've seen this so many times, you want that dude that's going to be able to show up in training camp and then show up in the preseason.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Shaq Davis did a really good job of that last year. But we can name countless players that were those
Daniel Butler.
Right. That were these
Victor,
training camp heroes, right?
Go start. Everybody knows. Why didn't this guy make the roster?
Right. Yeah. And so I would say Tipton's probably the guy to watch right now, to where it's like, okay, cool. He's making it known, right? Like he's showing up when it comes to training camp. Now is he going to be able to translate that to the preseason? And if so, find his way to the practice squad, continue to develop, continue to work with Keith Williams, continue to work with these other wide and everything, and then just develop and get better and then see what happens. I mean, look, this New Orleans Saints offense, they've got a lot of wide receivers on this roster right now. So they're clearly looking to
do it too. Right. We've got Kevin Austin in here,
right. And everything. And Kevin Austin sees himself as, an X receiver and things like that, which is where I think you want to drive some more competition with guys like A.T. Perry, Equanimity, St. Brown, maybe Cedric Wilson, although I think Cedric Wilson going to the slot would be huge for New Orleans. But yeah, I think you want to drive as much of that competition as possible and see how these guys respond to it.
Yeah, and Tipton was a guy, OTA's minicamp, we saw him do some first team reps, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the thing, is just seeing his speed. And I remember one of the plays pointed out, like he got right behind the defense. If Carr would have seen him, it would have definitely been a touchdown for him. So I do think so. And again, we're not saying any of these guys make the final roster, but it is encouraging to see big plays like that. There's so many plays that stood out. I just want to segue from here and say that Willie Gay Jr. looked fantastic again today.
Man.
And I just think from his positioning, just being in there to do things, I think Pete Werner looked excellent. He blew up that screenplay to Alvin Kamara. He's somebody who's had a really quiet, good day of camp. I tell you, the guy that I've noticed 2 days now is Isaiah Foskey.
Yeah, man.
He was in on the pressure on Jake Haener that led to the interception for Roger Teamer.
Yeah.
So it's like we make a lot about the interception, but it didn't happen unless the pressure came. And for a team that struggled to get after the quarterback, turned in their worst sack rating since 2016. I mean, they barely struggled to get above 30. And just seeing Isaiah Foskey 2 days in a row making plays, whether it's run defense, getting pressures on that, this is a really good sign, hopefully, of things to come. If he can stay available, stay healthy, continue to just make, again, like DA says, I don't have to see it every day, but I do need to see it. And so for him, cutting it loose, go and play some confidence, he's making an impact out there, and this is good news for Saints fans early on in the process, at least 2 days in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a great thing for the Saints to have not only Cam Jordan, not only Carr Granderson, not only Chase Young, but to have a fourth edge rusher that might be able to kind of be that cream that rises to the top, as Dennis Allen would say. There's a lot of really good opportunity there when you have that amount of guys that can rotate in. It allows you to keep the guys at the top fresh, but still have an impact as well when they're not on the field. I think those things are all really, really important to how the New Orleans Saints continue to impact, especially with how much they rotate their defensive line.
Yes.
And so if you're able to, for instance, utilize that Isaiah Foskey 5 or 6 snaps in the first half, that's 5 or 6 snaps. Your starting guys are fresher come the fourth quarter. And that could be a big difference. You know, you talk about the pressure that you get that leads to the interception. That could be a game sealing situation.
Big time.
Like that, right? So we talk about translatable moments that could show up in a game. Like these are the types of things that you want to see.
Yeah, and nothing to take away because Dennis Allen did say that Roger Teamer made a hell of a play, which he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely.
He loves him some Roger Teamer.
Yes, and Haener was targeting Bub Means on the play. Yeah. So it was one of the things we saw Rattler do that. It's just good to see the defense being in a position. And that was the second day that they've got a turnover. They picked off Carr yesterday, Damari on the pick six. They got 2 picks today. The second one, which was really the first one, was Derek Carr got picked off by Paulson Adebo and team. And now this was a different play because it wasn't just like a straight up pick. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm like defending Carr or anything because there's certain things that had just happened. But Cedric Wilson was coming across the formation. He was trying to make the play on it. He was going to the ground. He had it kind of like right in his hands, and he just kind of tipped it up at the last second. Adebo's right in the perfect position. It's an easy pick. It's a big play. And so, again, I know people, I see it on social media that it's like, Rattler starting. There's all the Rattler starting, all this other stuff now because of things. But 2 days in the camp, 2 picks for Derek Carr. Are we worried about that? Like, I know he had the busted play to Taysom, which may have went for a touchdown. We don't know because it just played out and he ended up finding the end zone. But I don't know if I'd give him a touchdown there. But, these picks early, are we really that concerned about Carr throwing picks in camp? No. Because Drew used to do it.
Yeah.
James used to do it. I mean, it's happened. So is it a big deal this early in the process?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, it's just like we were talking about to open up the show. Like, it's not out of the ordinary to see an offense working to get its legs under it at the beginning of training camp, whether you're coming into a brand new system or whether you're even repeating a system that just has new elements to it. And y'all, we are seeing the questions in the chat. We will get to some of these questions here in a sec. But like, I don't think it's time to start panicking about it yet. Now, if Derek Carr ends up, we get into next Saturday and he's thrown a pick every single day of camp,
right?
Then I think maybe we start to kind of go, all right, let's look a little bit deeper here.
Joint practices with the 49ers.
That's a good
matter.
Point.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that would be a big one.
But I think the other thing too, and this is what we saw with Drew a lot during training camp, is that sometimes, and we saw that with Jameis too. Like Jameis did a really good job of this throughout training camps. Of like, you know what, I'm going to try something. Yeah. I'm going to see like how much separation really is open for this receiver, for that receiver, and start to calibrate to what happens when I'm throwing to 12 versus 22 versus 16 versus 11. You know what I mean? And how does all of that end up? How do you navigate the calculus of that? Well, you have to find out the results first and everything. So I don't think it's time to start panicking on any of that or overreacting to any of that at this point. But I agree with you. Like San Francisco joint practices, that's when you're probably going to be a little bit more like game simulation in terms of practices, decision making, all that kind of stuff, even though they won't be in pads. But still, you're making different decisions during that time, and I think that's a good point in terms of when you're really going to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and if you go to Saints News Network, we chart the how each quarterback does every day. Don't get so wrapped up in the completions, and what I mean by that is, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm taking away from Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener or anything, but in those drills where they complete and they're short and they're check downs. I was sitting right there next to Deuce McAllister. He's like, these guys are late. These guys are late because you got to trust your receiver. You got to be able to trust your receiver to make those plays. So, again, you see it in some aspects where they go through their progressions, they go through their reads, and it kind of comes off a little bit of like a scramble head type thing where you're like, oh, I got to do it and just do it. But by that time, you could be sacked. Somebody, you could be hit and lose the ball, do all those types of things. And so I think that's something else to pay attention to. And it's just like, when you see that with some of the quarterbacks, maybe not necessarily trusting their first read or first instinct, this is the time that you do want to make those mistakes, especially 2 days into training camp.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You got to test some stuff out, right? Like, I mean, you got to figure all this stuff out. It's like dipping a toe in the water to see how cold it is before you jump in. All that kind of stuff. At least that's my strat.
Barely a toe.
That's my strat. But yes, absolutely. And so
out here in West Coast, I don't know how to do it.
Pacific Ocean ain't no joke, man. But yeah, so I really think that like that to me is more so the takeaway of all this is like, good, go out there and try, see what happens, try some stuff that you wouldn't typically try, all that kind of stuff. That to me is totally okay. Yeah,
and again, so those were a couple of plays that stood out. Again, Pete Warner standing out too. Willie Gay Jr. having a good day. Khaleke Hudson was another one that I think flashed up on my radar a couple times in there. We saw some really good run stuff. I tell you, another guy who I have noticed 2 days in a row, and especially made some plays today. Like he had big stuff for loss on Alvin Kamara on the middle run. That's Nathan Shepard. He looked really good today. I think he's somebody we've highlighted, we've talked about. Saints have to be better on the interior. That was part of what we talked about on the preview, wrote about all that. But he's in there at least for 2 plays today. I like seeing that from Nathan Shepard because he's not like Colin Saunders. Now, Bink is built a little bit different, right? And Nathan Shepard's built a little different than Bink. But, seeing him using his agility and athleticism. I think I was trying to combine the words somehow, but I don't know. So it's I hadn't had my second cup of coffee, you know what I mean? So that's probably why.
Good call.
Anyways, y'all know what you get. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. As he drinks his brand.
I got my coffee. You don't get brand mentions.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Even though it's good coffee. But at any rate, but yeah, seeing Nathan Shepard being able to do that and make those plays, like guys that stood out. Anthony Orje is another one that I think stood out a couple of times.
He's had a nice couple of days.
Yeah, a couple of days. And again, they're just making splash plays. Doesn't mean Nico Lalos is another one.
Oh,
2 days in a row, he's had a pass breakup.
Yeah.
I mean, he broke up that pass. It was going to be a swing pass out to the left to Shaheed from Haener, and he just got the hand up. Good awareness from him. He was a preseason standout, but seeing some of these guys perform well early is A, good sign of development, but B, just where you want to see some of these younger guys make plays or second-year players making plays. I think that's going to go a long way for this team.
Yeah, for sure. We should do an episode at some point to where we look at what the underrated value that can be added from or what value can be added from underrated aspects of every position, like pass blocking for running backs and getting your hands up as a defenseman. We might have to put our heads together on that.
Yeah,
there's some good stuff that could come from that. But yeah, no, look, Nico was a dude that got so much hype all throughout the preseason last year and everything.
He played well.
And yeah, deserved, I shouldn't say hype, but got so much attention because of his play over the course of the preseason last year. I'm really excited to see what step he takes forward next and everything with another year under his belt, spent the entire season with the team, continuing to develop, continue to grow. And I always kind of point to Carl Granderson as the kind of gold standard of that, right? Saints brought him in out of Wyoming, way undersized, comes in as an undrafted free agent, sits on the practice squad for a little bit, continues to build, continues to grow, literally rebuilt himself position, physical wise. And then found his way to now being, I think it's fair to say, the best piece of the Saints defensive line last year. He was the best run defender the year before last. He was the best pass rusher last year.
8.5 sacks.
Yeah. And so I think that he's the guy that's now scratching at double-digit sacks per season. So you have a gold standard. This was hey, here's how you do this. Here's how you get the 2-year extension off the exclusive rights free agent deal, and then pivot that into a long-term extension and things like that. It's cool to sort of look at guys like Nico Lalos who have a similar, showing similar flashes than what Carl Granderson was showing at that time. Maybe a little bit later, but still showing it. We started to see a little bit of that potential from a Trajan Jeffcoat, and hopefully we get to see him back out on the field at some point to where he can continue to kind of develop and grow and build, because he's another one of those guys that I think could have that kind of trajectory. And so great when you have that example on the team to be able to kind of say, okay, there's a pathway for me and I could follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you one other thing that I was just thinking about, because talk about players and stuff. I talked about Kool-Aid McKinstry and the one-on-one drill, but he did make a really, really good play in team. Now, it was one of those things where he was late coming across the formation because he was lined up on the right side, and Alante had to holler at him and say, hey, your assignment. So he peels off and he goes on to A.T. Perry over there. And so on that play, I'm pretty sure, I think it was Rattler. It was Rattler because it was the second team. And so he ended up having to take some safe check down, but he had to escape the pocket too because they had such good coverage downfield.
Yeah.
But that was just like a small little sample because they had the coverage downfield. Rattler doesn't have his options open. He has to take off and settles for like a 2-3 yard completion. I mean, but McKinstry, people have asked about what he's doing. That was a play. Like you see the rookie not known necessarily where he was lining up. And I'm not saying that, but Alante called him over and said, hey, this is where you should be here, just because of the assignment.
He takes the note, right? Like that's the other thing, right? And then implements it and then ends up doing that. I think that's big. Because you brought up Rattler there for a second, it made me think about something. One of the things that's going to be very interesting to watch is there's this big QB2 battle, right? That everybody wants to pay attention to. Backup quarterback syndrome. We know how it goes. But the thing that's so interesting is like watching Spencer Rattler, who has the athleticism to operate outside of structure, and then watching Jake Haener, who has sort of the mentality to operate within structure. It's two different approaches to the game competing with one another.
Yep.
I think we're going to be talking about these guys in very different ways, despite the fact that they're competing for the same thing. And I wonder how your quarterback coach, how your offensive coordinator, how your head coach evaluates that when they're very different types of players. Don't get me wrong. Spencer Rattler can operate inside of structure. Jake Haener has shown the ability to be able to operate outside of structure too. But where they're at their best, Rattler's athleticism plays a big role. Haener's mental processing plays a big role.
Yep.
And so I'm curious about how the fact that both of these guys are coming from different strengths for the same role, how it ends up impacting what that battle looks like. We don't have to get into that conversation, but because of the fact that you brought up Spencer Rattler, I just wanted to add it because it is an interesting sort of thing that like I'm very interested in watching.
Well, it's a fun dynamic too because you're going to see them in practice how they're going to split up preseason because Derek Carr's not going to be playing like all the preseasons. Are they going to give Rattler a whole half? Are they going to give Haener a whole half? What does that look like? How much reps does Peterman get? Again, with Carr, you don't need to see a ton, right? I just don't think so. But you also don't want to believe the hype because obviously we saw that drive against the Chiefs last year and that was like about as perfect of a drive that you could do. And that was like, okay, this is what we can expect. And it didn't. Thank God. Now I want to see that again this year, but I think I would be more inclined to believe it because Kubiak had beamed out there. But anyways, I say that. And so again, a lot of plays made today, a lot of players made a lot of waves. Charlie Smyth was up for kicking today. Matt Hayball. Charlie Smyth went 3 of 4 today. He missed one from 37, I think it was, wide left. It was his third kick. It was wide left. I mean, it wasn't by much, but the other part is they were working on this kickoff drill where they had two guys in the middle rushing the kick returner. And it was interesting because they used the jug machine some and they used Charlie Smyth some. And so what I was paying attention to is you had Phil Galliano, the assistant special teams coach down there, and one of the other guys marking the yardage on where the kick goes. So it was interesting because it's like I'm sitting here processing. I'm like, what advantage might be, and where they got the most praise for like Charlie Smyth is when he was kicking it towards the 1, 2, and the goal line. And I asked him afterwards. I'm like, hey, what is the ideal range? He said, as long as it gets inside the 10, that's what you want. Because he saw some kicks hanging up and a little bit, but just an interesting wrinkle there, I'd say. And it was a Matt Hayball punting day. Had one shank, out of his other ones, but he looked pretty good, pretty comfortable. Again, he's a left-footed punter. It's a little bit different. That operation is obviously a little bit different with him holding for Charlie Smyth on that field goal. So that's some other things to take in consideration. Taysom still playing personal protector, Jonathan Abram right behind him, and then Jordan Howden. So special teams matter. Special teams are going to be a big bread and butter, and some of these players are going to make the roster. But your kind of thoughts on some of the things that we saw there?
Yeah, I think just getting back to more of the kicker and punter side of the conversation. I don't know that we're watching a wide open battle right now, but I do think that the Saints will pay attention if Groupie struggles and Smyth excels, if Headley struggles and Hayball excels, which that's not my insinuation of what's happening right now at all. Goodness gracious. Groupie went 8 of 8 yesterday.
Yeah, 8 of 8.
You know what I mean? And most of those were short. They were extra point to 34-ish throughout the day. And so take that for what you will. But I think the Saints will pay attention. Like they'll listen. They'll believe what they're seeing. Yeah. If the incumbent is struggling and the incoming player, fair to say rookie in this situation, makes it interesting. And so I think I just wanted to highlight that I don't know that we're watching a wide open battle at the moment, but we're definitely in the midst of something that could jostle a role available or something like that if we start to see some struggles. But I don't know that we're seeing that just yet.
Yeah, nothing there. And I say this too. We've pointed this out on our previous show. Charlie Smyth is a roster exemption. I know he wants to.
That's true.
I know he wants to play. Right. There's no pressure there right now. Like he's still learning things. But I tell you, I was also was talking to him. He went to John Carney's school up there in Carlsbad that long ago. One of the things he did during the break, and so he got a lot of insight from it. And so I'm excited. Like this is a guy that when you look at him, we know he has the leg. I mean, this guy could hit from 70, and that's not a joke or understatement or anything.
No,
like he could hit from 70 and maybe have a little bit more to spare. Like it'll be fascinating to see how he's able to grow and develop. And it's the same thing with Matt Hayball, because again, I like his hang time is one thing, but he's got a stronger leg.
Yeah.
There's that's the thing is, the theme is these two kickers have stronger legs, but they may not have the refinement or the tools that the Saints need at this moment to unseat somebody.
Yeah, it's kind of like we were just talking about with the quarterbacks, right? Like there are two different types of kickers. There are two different types of punters. So you just kind of have to believe what you're seeing. And I think that the New Orleans Saints will stay true to that based upon what we saw from last year.
For sure. Anything else that kind of really stood out for you in this camp? I'm going to go through my notes and look, y'all, this is a page of stuff that we just write. And so we make sure we dial into every practice to give you all the latest and greatest. And so I think some people just kind of looking in the chat, because I've seen some questions. Some people were asking about rotations and stuff. Roderick Teamer and JT Gray were second safeties today behind Tyron and Jonathan Abram. Now, of course, this is kind of like the walkthrough looks and all this other stuff. So it's not always there, but I always put and say, okay, this player is a part of it. It's like Michael Jacobson was a part of the first team reps. Dallin Holker again. We talked about Jordan Mims in there. Adam Prentice was part as far as the fullback goes. So it's something that just keep tabs on. It doesn't mean that's how it's going. I'll tell you another one that on the defensive side, the second day, Jalen Ford runs with the first team.
Yeah, that was really interesting to watch.
You get some reps. I mean, it's obviously Willie Gay Jr., Demario Davis, and Pete Warner, but Jalen Ford getting some love and walkthroughs as the only other linebacker that you're using with the first team through 2 days.
And typically in place of Demario Davis.
Yeah.
When they do that, to where Demario kind of steps back, he kind of watches the defense from afar and everything, like deeper than the safeties. And it was Jalen Ford that walked in there. And I think that's an interesting highlight because Jalen Ford didn't get to participate in OTAs, rookie minicamps. I mean, we really only saw him towards the end of mandatory minicamps and things like that. I want to go to, because you were talking about the safeties real quick. Tim Dunn had the question here about what's the safety rotation look like. So I just wanted to acknowledge the question there. But I think the starters are pretty consistent, right? Tyrann Mathieu, Jonathan Abram, we're seeing that. But it's interesting right now watching like when Will Harris and Jordan Howden are second team versus when Roderick Teamer and JT Gray are and things like that. And so that's a piece that we'll continue to track. Still early, but that was an early look at it for sure. Yeah,
and I think we just because we're talking about some of the defensive formation, but Willie Gay Jr., I had somebody come up and said, they're using him more on the line. And we talked about his potential as being the new Zach Bond. Like, again, he's standing out. He's doing all those types of things. But this is somebody, again, we should really be excited.
Man.
He's somebody who's going to be a game changer. He's making plays early. I just think that he's somebody who can, you already look at this defense. And I said this, too, is that this is – I don't want to say it's the no-name defense or anything. That's because that has already been a thing. But it's not a defense that has a lot of household names. And I know Cam Jordan said there's a lot of dogs on this team, and it's true. They do. We know them, but I don't think the league knows them. But you know what I'm saying? Is everybody knows Tyron. Everybody knows about Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to find some of these guys that you're going to say, if I make a list, they may not be there and stuff. So I'm curious to see who of those guys continue to emerge. But the safety battle is a big thing there. Cornerback battle. I mean, it's nothing that we haven't seen that really surprises us right now. I think that's the biggest thing.
Completely agree. Yeah. And I would say the same thing, like just talking rotations. If we look at the offensive line, no big surprises there, particularly when you get to team drills and stuff like that. Like your starting offensive line for the past 2 days has been the starting offensive line. Tallahassee Fuanga at left tackle, Nick Saldiveri at left guard, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and then Trevor Penning at right tackle. There hasn't been a lot of detracting from that once you get into team drills and things like that. So it looks like that doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be week one, but it looks like the Saints are doing a pretty good job of saying, this is what we think the right combination is. Let's get a look at it and continue to do that. Let these guys get used to taking snaps next to one another, which is almost like the offensive line is so much about how you operate as a unit, just as much as how you operate individually. And so if you can get comfortable with the guy that's on your left shoulder, on your right shoulder, I think that is just as valuable as how many steps are you taking individually as a player.
Yeah, and the fact is, too, I think you look at it, it's a sign of confidence, too. It's like, this is your job to lose, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like I put out before and said this, and I'm not saying that they're going to be the Lions, but if you can get 3 young guys on that line and they can hit, and then you have Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, then the future looks a little bit better for you. at the offensive line in a position that has to be better, has to be more athletic, has to do a lot of things to make sure that the Saints have success, because all of this Clint Kubiak offense is going to be predicated on what this offensive line does. And if they don't have the right offensive line out there, it's going to be struggle bus, and they're going to have the same result. But at the same time, it is encouraging because Fuanga is still left tackle, Penning still right tackle, and Saldivari is still left guard. And so we're going to see them get tested against San Francisco. And, of course, when the pads come on, I think they'll be tested. But that's one test. But how do you do against the opposition? Because you're going to probably know some tendencies on some of the players that you go up against. But, I want to see full padded practice. How does Saldivari line up against Nathan Shepard or Colin Saunders? How does Trevor Penning counter Carl Granderson? Some of the things are Fuaga. How does he counter some of those other ones? I mean, that's what we want to see out of them guys, for sure.
100%. All right, we're coming up on about 5 minutes away from an hour. I don't know how that went so quickly. Do you have any other notes that you want to hit, or do you want to jump to some questions?
Yeah, we can jump to some questions. I mean, at the same time, I don't know how far an hour goes that
man, that's fast.
But at the same time, while he's pulling up some of the questions, don't forget to like and subscribe. Of course, for those SoCal fans that are out there, I know it's disappointing that Saints aren't opening any training camp practices. They are opening the 2 when they get back home. But as we said, we're going to keep promoting and tell you that we've got a live show in the works August 8th over at Bourbon Street Bar and Grill over in Fullerton, California. It's an open invite. And like I told Ross today, the best way for SoCal fans to show their support and show that it was a mistake that they should have opened training camp, show up and pack that place out. Like, we're going to have some giveaways from FOCO and some cool Saints merch and swag and all that other stuff. And we'll see you in the other things. But, just something to keep in mind, and we'll promote it and stuff. But this is your, I don't know, what is this, 6 days left in July? So your 2 week warning.
2 week warning. Yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I've never given anyone a 2 week warning for anything.
2 week notice.
That's great. I don't even give 2 week notices. I just dip. I ain't coming back. What do I care? All right, we'll go to Molly here, who wanted to know a little bit about how Jordan Mims looks so far in Kendra Miller's place. This dude that's walking behind us in frame right now, if you're watching on video, has been creeping on us consistently. I'm not even talking about since we've been recording. I mean the entire time that we've been here. So fitting that would happen there. But how did Jordan Mims look in place of Kendre Miller? If you don't mind, I'll start here just because I watched the offense and the individual drills, stuff like that. Again, the footwork was the thing that really stood out, watching him during the drills and then seeing him bump up in terms of the rotation. I think those are really the most important things. Watching him, good hands as a pass catcher. I think he's got some advancements to make, of course, you're always going to, but as a pass protector and as a route runner. But him as a guy with good footwork, his ability to catch out of the backfield, and his patience and vision, I think, are things that stand out. Again, space to grow and all that kind of stuff in terms of reaching the ceiling, but really good stuff there. We haven't gotten to see a ton of him yet, or a ton of big stuff from him yet during team drills, though. I think it's fair to say. Yeah, and I think Mims is a guy, and I said this before, that the Saints were really high on him coming out of college. They were chomping at the bit to try to get him after he got released off of Bill's practice squad. He's somebody that ran in here. He didn't have to be with rookie minicamp, but he said he wanted to be because he wanted to learn the playbook. Yep. He felt this is something that he could do well, and he's trying to do more special teams. And again, with Kendre Miller down, he has a tremendous outlook and impact to make. And he can do it. And I think I turned to you. I don't know if I said it early in the episode, but I know I said it to you before that there was a toss play where Taysom at fullback. Oh, yeah, Taysom at fullback. And then Jordan Mims running. I was like, I kind of see that one. That's pretty fun. But he's somebody we're keeping tabs on. I mean, we're keeping tabs on as many people as possible, but not everybody makes plays and everything does. And we're two people. So 2 people, 4 eyes. So back off. Unfortunately, both of these eyes can only look at one spot. I would have to agree there. And I love the note there about he went to mandatory minicamp, rookie minicamp because he wanted to learn the playbook. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like accountability. Yeah. It's pretty good. Pretty good. All right, let's go to Rose City here, who wanted to know about A.T. Perry and how he's looked. I think he's had some nice. He had that catch yesterday. Went from Peterman, like we said, that was one of the bigger plays of camp so far. And then I said today it was twice actually. I think he got stonewalled, but Kool-Aid McKinstry on that rep, that 101 rep, and then Alante got him, I think, a little bit too. So look, I don't think I'd worry about A.T. Perry. I think he's going to be just fine, but at the same time, he's a guy that's coming in his second year that's got a lot to process, a lot to learn.
And again, a lot of these guys, and I'm going to say this again, I said it every episode, but the rookies always tell you in their second year, the game slows down and they are able to process a lot more.
Yeah.
But with Keith Williams, I know it's probably like processing algebraic equations or, calculus at this point, because that's a lot to learn in this offense. Like, you got to think about it. You learned one offense last year under one different wide receivers coach. Now you got to learn a new offense under a new offensive coordinator and a new wide receivers coach.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's exactly easy for everybody.
Yeah.
And of course these are football players, but just food for thought.
Definitely easier for them than it would be for us, but definitely not easy. That's for sure.
For sure.
John, I guess you could answer this question too, I suppose. But Pelican Zola wants to know, Ross, which player looked best on offense and defense? I'll mention, we talked about Willie Gay.
Yeah.
I'll take the chalk answer for that one. Willie Gay has easily been the player that's been the most fun to watch over the defensive side. You know who's been somebody I've really enjoyed watching on offense? Foster Morrow. He has looked really, really good in this offense. We talked about how he bulked up big time over the course of like OTAs minicamp or going into OTAs minicamp and stuff like that. He's just doing a lot more of the, intermediate attack in the passing game, running the seams, doing those things, clean hands catcher, all that stuff. So I think he's somebody that has kind of stood out to me. I don't know that I could say that he's it's hard to pick who's been best on offense because so much of it has been like acclamation and stuff like that. But he has been the guy that, like, when I look up and I see like a play happen or something like that, and I look back and I'm like, oh, who's number right now? It's been 87. That has been a guy that even when he's not making the catch, there was something that's kind of drawn me to him and stuff like that, whether it's the route run, whether it's the block, whether it's the catch, whether it's the run after the catch, whatever it might be. He's been somebody that stood out to me a couple times here over the last couple of days.
I mean, he's the guy that does the dirty work. Like
everything,
all the dirty work. I mean, like and there's such an appreciation for that. And I get it. He doesn't catch a lot of passes and all that other stuff. But with Juwan Johnson out of the mix, it's his time to kind of raise up in the depth chart and come to life here.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say he doesn't have a choice, but like he's got to be that guy right now.
Yeah.
And I think he could be a much better and much more involved into this offense. I thought that even before Juwan's injury that he could be involved a lot more, but with him and Dallin Holker and Michael Jacobson get some looks now at the tight end room, it is going to be a really heavy load for Foster Moreau, early on. I mean, we saw in minicamp, he got 7 targets in one day. I mean, he's going to be a part of this plan, you know what I mean, with Juwan out of the mix. But I like Foster as a pick. Defensively for me, again, Willie Gay Jr., I said Pete Werner was another one that's kind of quietly been another one. Yeah. Nathan Shepard I talked about too. Carl Granderson, Carl Granderson still looks like Carl Granderson, making some really strong plays. And so I think he's another one that I think you got to look at. And again, I like Alontae Taylor, the way he's kind of just put himself in position so far and just how he's been able to play. And Jonathan Abrams, another one. I think he's looking quietly I think what I appreciate most about it, how much instruction he's still looking for. Yeah. Even though he might be like the starter, he's still going to try. Like I saw him talking to DA today about some pointer stuff. He's obviously got Marcus Robertson there. I mean, he's a guy that's trying to do everything he can to earn the spot. Yep. And especially, we've talked about the Justin Simmons possibility and all that other stuff. I mean, as of right now, I feel comfortable if they were playing a game today that he's going to play really well. And Tyrann Mathieu talked about his communication between those two. It's just 100 right now. So I really feel good about that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, Ross. Well, man, I don't know how this zoomed by. I don't know. Maybe when time stops or something like that. Like, I don't believe it's been an hour or something. I don't know.
That's sweet.
Without getting all sentimental and stuff. But
time stops.
This is going to be the end of the road for today. We'll be back on Friday and Saturday. The Saints have a day off on Sunday. But pads are coming on soon. We're going to see a lot more information tomorrow. And of course, we're going to be back. I think maybe if we continue to use this venue, you guys have got to let us know if this worked out well or don't do this again.
We had classes letting out and stuff like that. We were not anticipating classes. So let us know, like, if this was okay with you guys, and we can keep going. Maybe it sounds different on your end than it sounds for us.
Sure, maybe so. Yeah. But that's going to do it for us today. And again, don't forget to like, subscribe, go to Saints News Network for all the written information. Don't forget to follow Locked On Podcast. Ross going to answer a bunch of training camp questions for tomorrow. He's going to be obviously covering the team every single day. So make sure you get your fill there. And obviously, Second and Saints, Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your mom and them, all that good stuff. And, we really appreciate all the support you guys give us. And we're going to be here as long as you guys keep supporting us. And so, I don't know, that might be until we're dead at this point because of the way it's done. And hopefully the Saints win a Super Bowl in that time period or something. At least you can get back in the playoffs and win a playoff and make a playoff run. That'd be nice.
Yeah, they are talking about that up to 30-year extension in New Orleans. Yeah, it really might be. It really might be until the end of time.
Could be. You never know. Guys, we appreciate all your support. That's going to do it for us today. John Hendrix.